Welcome to Best Math and Science videos, factoring trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. In this video, we're considering trinomials in which the leading coefficient is a number other than 1. For example, how can you factor the trinomial 3x squared plus 11x plus 6? Start by noticing the leading coefficient 3 and the constant 6. Then think, 3 times 6 equals 18. To factor the trinomial, you need to find two numbers that you can multiply to get 18. But the sum of the numbers must equal the coefficient of the x term 11, as shown here. You will use these numbers to rewrite the trinomial. So let's make a list of integers you can multiply to get 18. 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. Which of these can you add to get 11? 2 and 9. 2 plus 9 equals 11. So substitute 2 plus 9 in place of 11 in the expression. And then use the distributive property to write each term separately. Next, draw parentheses around the first two terms and around the second two terms. What is the greatest common factor of each set of parentheses? Factor x out of the first term and factor 3 out of the second term. Notice that both these terms have the common factor 3x plus 2. This shows that you can use the distributive property in reverse. So the expression becomes x plus 3 times 3x plus 2. And this is the factored form of the expression 3x squared plus 11x plus 6. These last steps are called factoring by grouping. You might need to pause the video to look more carefully at these. Or, for more help with this, see the description below for a link to the Best Math and Science video on factoring by grouping. For now, let's recap the steps in factoring trinomials when the leading coefficient is not 1. Remember that you start by multiplying the leading coefficient and the constant. Then find two integers that multiply to give that number. Substitute the two numbers into the expression and use grouping to find the factored expression. Okay, let's look at another example using these steps. What are the factors of 4x squared plus 15x minus 4? Remember that the first step is to multiply the leading coefficient and the constant term. So 4 times negative 4 equals negative 16. Then, step 2 is to find two integers that multiply to give that number. To get 16, you can multiply 1 and 16, 2 and 8, or 4 and 4. Since the product must be negative 16, one of the integers must be negative. But remember, the sum of the integers must equal the coefficient of x, which is positive 15. Which is the correct pair of numbers? Negative 1 plus 16 equals 15. And step 3 is to substitute negative 1 and 16 into the expression. You can now multiply the expression to get 4x squared minus 1x plus 16x minus 4. But the coefficient of 1 is usually not shown, so this is the same as 4x squared minus x plus 16x minus 4. Next, step 4 is using grouping to find the factored expression. Group the first two terms and group the second two terms. You need to factor the greatest common factor from each of these. So factor x out of the first group and factor 4 out of the second group. Notice that the remaining parts are identical. This means you can use the distributive property in reverse to write the expression as x plus 4 times 4x minus 1. And this is the factored form of the expression. If you're unsure about how we got this last step, check out the best math and science video on the distributive property. There's a link in the description below. Now, let's look at some more problems. What are the factors of 6x squared minus 17x plus 5? Start by multiplying the leading coefficient and the constant term. 6 times 5 equals 30. And then, find two integers that multiply to give that number. Integers you can multiply to get 30 are 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, or 5 and 6. Which pair should you use to factor the trinomial? Since 30 is positive, the numbers you multiply could be both positive or both negative. The sum, however, must equal negative 17. Adding negative 2 and negative 15 gives negative 17. So, substitute negative 2 and negative 15 into the expression and multiply to get 6x squared minus 2x minus 15x plus 5. Group the first two terms and group the second two terms. You need to factor the greatest common factor from each of these. For the first group, the greatest common factor is 2x. So you get 2x times 3x minus 1. The second group is a little harder. The greatest common factor of this group is 5. So if you factor out 5, you get 5 times negative 3x plus 1. But notice the term in parentheses. Compare that to the first part. They aren't the same. But look what happens if you factor out negative 5 instead. You get negative 5 times 3x minus 1. Now compare the term in parentheses with the first part. They are the same. So this is how you should factor the expression. Now, since the terms in the parentheses are the same, you can use the distributive property in reverse, and the expression becomes 2x minus 5 times 3x minus 1. And this is the factored form of the expression. If you multiply this out, you will get the original trinomial. Here's another problem. What are the factors of negative 2x squared minus 11x plus 63? Notice that the leading coefficient is a negative number. It's easiest to start by factoring out negative 1, so the expression becomes negative 1 times 2x squared plus 11x minus 63. And then you can solve the rest as we have before. So start by noticing the coefficient of x squared, 2, and the constant, negative 63. And then multiply them to get negative 126. You need to find two integers with a product of negative 126. You can check to see that possible pairs are 1 and 126, 2 and 63, 3 and 42, 7 and 18, 9 and 14. Remember, to get negative 126, one of the numbers must be negative, and you must be able to add the numbers to get 11. So look back at the possible integer pairs. You can see that adding negative 7 and 18 gives 11. So substitute negative 7 plus 18 into the expression and multiply. Group the first two terms and group the second two terms in brackets. What is the greatest common factor of each group? For the first group, factor out x, and from the second group, factor out 9. The parts in parentheses are identical, which is what we need. So now use the distributive property in reverse to write the expression as negative 1 times x plus 9 times 2x minus 7. So this is the factored form of the expression. Let's look at a couple of other things that might trip you up. How can you factor 18 plus 33x plus 9x squared. Before you factor any trinomial, you need to make sure the expression is written in standard form. This means the expression must have the x squared term first, the x term second, and the constant third. So in this case, you need to switch the 18 with the 9x squared. The trinomial then becomes 9x squared plus 33x plus 18. Also, you need to look at the numbers. Is there a common factor? In this case, there is. You can factor out 3, so the trinomial becomes 3 times 3x squared plus 11x plus 6. We factored this trinomial at the start of the video, so we already know that the factored form is 3 times x plus 3 times 3x plus 2. This is the factored form of the trinomial. In this video, you've seen how to factor a trinomial of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. It's very important to remember that you will sometimes see trinomials that must be solved in other ways. To learn more about factoring, watch these related videos. Factoring trinomials when the leading coefficient is 1, factoring by grouping, or using the distributive property, or perfect square trinomials. Links to these videos are in the description below. And be sure to click below to subscribe to best math and science videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time.